Good day, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Military and Foreign Affairs Network. I am your host, the voice of reason. Today, we're in day 18 of the continued war between Russia and Ukraine, and as you can see from my map, I have the Google Earth version of what we're going to look at today. I may transition back over to the Who Controls What map, but specifically, I wanted to take a look at two different areas. I wanted to look at Mariupol, and I also wanted to look at Yavoriv. And that is where, in the west, where we have seen a fairly large-scale Russian cruise missile attack approximately 30 miles to the west of Lviv. And again, the Russians appear to be going after training areas that could possibly being used by the Ukrainian military to train foreign volunteers in an area as well that is kind of a reception area for possible Western equipment being brought into the country. So if we move again to the just to the northwest of Lviv, we can see this sprawling military encampment. That's about 8 to 10 miles from the Polish border as a bird flies. So we'll go from here and about 10 miles from the Polish border. So well within, obviously, the borders of Ukraine. But if we zoom in here, you can see the size of this military base, and it is a sprawling military base that has reported to be continuing to train soldiers of both the Ukraine and obviously the possibility of training foreign volunteers who have entered the Ukraine as well. And again, most of both foreign assets in terms of weapons and equipment have been coming via the Polish border, located in this area. I'll scroll back where you guys can see it. So that's the Polish border. Obviously, you have the Slovak border, the Hungarian border, Romanian border, and you have Moldova over here. So again, this is where the strike occurred. Anywhere from around 30 cruise missiles were probably involved in this strike, again hitting about 30 aim points inside of this sprawling military facility. And you can actually go in and you can see the entrance to the base itself. We come over here and we go to our ground view, and obviously this is in the summer, but you can see the entrance to the base, and you can clearly see it is a Ukrainian military site. And you can see the Ukrainian symbol there. And most Ukrainian and Russian military bases, if you look at these bases, they have these type of walls that go around the bases, both Russian and Ukraine. And obviously, this base was probably in operation before the fall of the Soviet Union. That's kind of why you see the similarities between the Ukrainian military bases and those of Russian or Soviet layouts. And so we'll exit out of here. And again, it sounds like this base was hit pretty hard. Again, up to 30 cruise missiles hitting the base, and we know now that approximately 35 KIA and well over 100 wounded in that attack. And you can see ammunition storage facilities and what have you in the base too, and training areas to the northeast as well. But that was the base that the media is talking about right now that was hit by this Russian cruise missile strike. It's being reported that it was possible fixed-wing assets of the Russian military that fired those cruise missiles. So in all likelihood, it was either Bear bombers or the backfire bombers firing these cruise missiles at an extended range, probably within the confines of Belarus, or other areas outside of the actual Ukraine when they launched those missiles. Furthermore, we're hearing reports of very heavy fighting taking place in Mariupol, and that fighting has continued for some time. But what is interesting, it would appear that the Russians have captured the eastern portions of Mariupol. So the eastern side of Mariupol is a heavy industrial area, probably one of the more difficult areas to cross. Again, Mariupol is divided by the Kalmius River, and you can see that there. And there are a couple of different crossings. It's hard to say at this point if these bridges have been in fact blown. I would say that at some point the Ukrainians may blow them to prevent a Russian advance from the eastern sector of the city. Now, with that being said, probably not a major issue for the Russians to maneuver to the west. And again, there are forces of the Russian military already to the west of Mariupol, as we have seen those forces again come out of the Crimea and head both west, north, and east, which has kind of created that now that land bridge to the eastern separatist areas. But again, it looks like the Russians have in fact encircled Mariupol, and that encirclement has been underway for some time. But this is kind of the first within the last 24 38 hours we have heard that the Russians have actually maneuvered into Mariupol proper, and especially in this industrial area located on the eastern side of the Kalmius River. And again, you can see here very large, expansive industrial area, very difficult to fight in, very urbanized terrain, and that's where you're going to see, and that's where you have seen the Russians maneuver tanks into this area. And you could see in some video clips of Russian T-72B3s firing directly into some of these buildings as they maneuver to seize control of this eastern district. Now, probably what's to come will be eventually the storming of the western district. Western district is a little bit bigger. More residential buildings and houses than the eastern district, which is more or less again that built up industrial area. But again, it does appear that the Russians have in fact seized the eastern portion of that area. And now we're going to try to scroll out here and go into our who controls what map, and where you can kind of see exactly what's happening in terms of that. All right, here we are. So again, not a lot of changes to the map overall. And again, the reason for that is, as we have talked about in the past, it is these large cities right now that the Russians are attempting to circumvent and eventually gain control over. So we know that, again, as of today, Kiev is not fully encircled, and the Russians continue to fight on the suburbs, both on the eastern bank of the Dnieper and the western bank as well. But again, the Russians continue to maneuver and look to completely circumvent Kiev. Now, again, from my point of view, I don't know how long it'll take the Russians to do this. And then compounding that, once the Russians actually do completely seal off Kiev, I think it's going to be fairly difficult for the Russians to maintain that siege of Kiev, which may in fact lead to an all-out assault on Kiev for the Russians to try and take. Because again, we don't really know how much food and supplies the Ukrainians have within Kiev to hold out a siege. But again, given the thin line of area of occupation by the Russians, once they finally do completely encircle Kiev, it's going to be challenging and difficult for the Russians to maintain that siege of Kiev. So again, if you envision the red areas kind of coming around and then finally sealing off Kiev, that's going to be a very thin area of control. And directly to the Russians' front are going to be a fairly significant number of Ukrainian forces located inside of Kiev. And then obviously, you're also going to have Ukrainian forces that are going to be outside of that ring of control by the Russian Federation. So, in effect, the Russians are also going to be kind of surrounded themselves, especially in terms of facing Ukrainian forces inside of Kiev, and then especially to the south and west of Kiev once that ring is established. But again, even if the Russians try to make that assault on the city, it is going to be very, very challenging. Again, we have nuclear-hardened subways running through and under the city, so the Ukrainian forces can continue to maneuver around those areas and inside the city without being attacked by Russian artillery and fixed-wing tactical aircraft, again, using those subway systems. And again, same thing within Kharkov to the east. And again, we continue to hear about the possibility of the Russians circling down, crossing the Bug River, and then coming down and laying siege to Odessa. Again, I think any siege of Odessa is probably a bit off. We continue to hear about the Russians deploying possible naval infantry assets aboard ships. But again, I don't think we will see any sort of amphibious landing, especially near Odessa, and the amount of resistance that is in Odessa would make it very, very problematic for a Russian amphibious operation near Odessa. Again, you're going to have to see this area of control, this red area, kind of start to extend well close to Odessa, and not these little thin areas of maneuver that you're seeing with the Russians, but again, actual areas of fairly firm control before we would see any sort of amphibious landing in Odessa, as those forces would be at risk of getting cut off and attacked by a significant amount of Ukrainian forces that are obviously operating and have fortified Odessa. But that is the news for today. We are continuing to monitor and report, and we'll probably have more coverage here very, very soon. Appreciate you joining us, and again, we will have more soon. Have a good day, everybody.